Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome back to the daily readings of Srila Prabhupada's books. And we are back here at the source, in a sense. I was just talking to Lee and Vicky, our old friends, world travelers, on a pilgrim's journey on their way back to Goloka Vrindavan, stopping off here and there along the way. It's nice to see them again. We bugged to Seb, who just saved the day and brought his hard drive over so that I could make a backup copy of my certain things in my computer when I try to update it. And we have Radharaman, that saint among Jews, and Abhay, the newest initiate on the block. And we started here in March of 2018 doing the live streams of these readings, which I've been doing for 6 years, more. And now we're just about, we're on 57, chapter 57 of the 10th canto. And we started right around the 60th chapter, or maybe a few chapters later, in March of 2018. And now while we're here this time, this visit, we'll have completed the whole Bhagavatam in this wonderful format. It's kind of like a fireside chat kind of format, And it's really nice. So welcome to all of you out there in cyberspace. We're so happy. We're up to almost 1,900 followers on this, and that's really substantial considering what we're hearing and what we're contemplating. It's deep stuff. Srimad-Bhagavata Mahima Stotram by Srila Sanatan Goswami, the senior member of the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan and the senior disciple of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself, who is Radha and Krishna, together in the same form, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Supreme Absolute Truth. So Sanatana Goswami Lord Chaitanya spent more time instructing Sanatana Goswami, in terms of days, or 2 months actually straight, than any other person on the planet. And this is one of the books that he wrote after that. And his goal of the book was to offer 108 obeisances to the Vrindavan pastimes of Krishna. And this particular 5-verse stotra is the 107th obeisance. It's right at the end of the book. And he's offering obeisances to the Srimad-Bhagavatam because it was the Bhagavatam that gave us Krishna's pastimes in literary form. Okay, so it's a wonderful prayer, beautiful prayer, glorifying the Srimad-Bhagavatam. And if we meditate it deeply while we're hearing, then we can better enter into the reading of the Bhagavatam and understand what we're doing. Srimad-Bhagavatam Mahima Stotram, and it goes like this. Sarva Shastra Dipi Yusha, Sarva Vedaika Satpala, Sarva Siddhanta Ratnadya, Sarvalokaika Drikprada. O nectar from the ocean of all scriptures, singular fruit of all the Vedas, rich mine of the precious gems of all conclusive truths, you are the only giver of sight to all the worlds. Sarva Bhagavata Prana, Srimad Bhagavata Prabho, Kalidvandodita Ditya, Sri Krishna Parivartita. O life air of all the Supreme Lord's devotees, O Master, Srimad Bhagavatam, you are the sun risen in the darkness of Kali. You are the exact image of Sri Krishna. Paramananda Pataya, Prema Varshak Shradayate, Sarvada Sarvasevyaya, Sri Krishnaya Namostu Me. I bow down to you, who are supremely blissful to read. Your every syllable pours down a flood of prema. You can always be served by everyone. You are Sri Krishna himself. Mreka bandho mat sangin mad guru man mahadana man nishtadaga mad bhagya mad ananda namostute. My only friend, my constant companion, my spiritual master, my great wealth, my savior, my good fortune, my source of ecstasy, I bow down to you. Sadhu, sadhu tadayin, adini chochatakara, hanamunchagadachin mam, premna rit kantayospura. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O exalter of the most fallen, please never leave me. Always appear in my heart and my voice with pure love. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 Vasudevaya. So this is a very heavy chapter, chapter 57. It follows up from the chapter we just read yesterday, the Samantaka jewel. I'll just give you a little, let me see what they have here. Yeah. It's just for the benefit of Lee and Vicky and anyone else out there who didn't hear yesterday's reading. There was a devotee of the sun god named Satrajit, and he worshipped the sun god so nicely that the sun god presented him with a jewel, which was a very special jewel. It's called the Samantaka jewel, and this jewel could produce 170 pounds of gold every day. And not only that, but it was very effulgent. It came from the sun planet, and it was very effulgent. So he was a little proud of it. And he brought it into Dwarka and wore it on his chest, and everyone thought that the sun god had arrived. So they said to Krishna, oh, the sun god must have come to see you, because everyone's coming to see you. And he said, no, this is not the sun god, this is Satrajit, and he has this jewel given to him by the sun god. He's a devotee of the sun god. So then, anyway, there was a lot of things that happened, and his brother, Satrajit's brother, tried to show it off, and he put it on his chest and went into the forest, and a lion killed him, took the jewel because it was so attractive, and then Jambavan, who was a great devotee of Lord Ramachandra, who was very old and very powerful, the most powerful person on the earth at that time, and he broke the neck of the lion and just with his bare hands and took the jewel and brought it to his son. And then Krishna, and then there was a rumor started that maybe, Krishna, because Krishna had asked Satrajit to give the jewel to the king, Ugrasena, because in the Vedic age the king was representative of God and everything in the kingdom belonged to him. So, but he didn't do it, he refused. And Krishna didn't say anything, he didn't chastise him, but it wasn't very nice. It was an offense, actually. So then there was a rumor started by Satrajit that maybe Krishna took the jewel, So anyway, in order to clear the air, Krishna actually himself personally went and found Prasena, the brother of Satrajit, dead, and then the lion dead. And he knows everything, of course, but he followed the trail to the opening of a cave, and he went inside the cave and he found the jewel, and he had a big fight with Jambavan, who's so powerful, and Jambavan was able to realize that Krishna must be Ramachandra, the same personality of Godhead, that's his worshipable deity. And so he gave the jewel back to Krishna, and also his daughter, who was of marriageable age and was very, very beautiful, Jambavati, became the second queen of Krishna. And so now, because of all these intrigues, Satrajit is going to have to pay the price, the ultimate price, and he's murdered. And how all this unfolded is going to be described in this chapter, chapter 57. This chapter describes how Lord Krishna, after the murder of Satrajit, killed Shatadhanva and had Akrura bring the Samataka jewel back to Dwarka. When Lord Sri Krishna heard that the Pandavas had supposedly been burned to death in the palace of Lak, he went to Hastinapur with Lord Baladev to maintain the principles of worldly protocol, even though, being omniscient, he knew the report was false. With Krishna out of Dwarka, Akrura and Kritavarma incited Shatadhanva to steal the Samataka jewel from Satrajit. Bewildered by their words, the sinful Shatadhanva murdered King Satrajit in his sleep and stole the gem. Queen Satyabhama, who by that time had been given to Krishna along with the jewel, Satyabhama, was overcome with grief at the death of her father, and she rushed to Hastinapur to report the sorrowful news to Sri Krishna. Together with Lord Baladev, Krishna then returned to Dwarka to kill Shatadhanva. Shatadhanva went to Akrura and Kritavarma to beg for help, but when they refused, he left the jewel with Akrura and fled for his life. Krishna and Balaram pursued him, and Lord Krishna beheaded him with his sharp-edged disc. When the Lord could not find the Samataka jewel on Shatadhanva's person, Baladev told him that Shatadhanva must have left it in someone's care. Baladev further suggested that Krishna return to Dwarka to find the jewel, while he, Baladev, would take the opportunity to visit the king of Videha. Thus Lord Balaram traveled to Mithila and remained there for a few years, during which he taught King Duryodhana the art of fighting with a club. Lord Krishna returned to Dwarka, had the funeral rites performed for Satrajit. When Akrura and Kritavarma heard how Shatadhanva had met his death, they fled Dwarka. Soon many kinds of disturbances, mental, physical, and so on, began to afflict Dwarka, and the citizens concluded that the cause of these troubles must be Akrura's exile. The city elders explained, once there was a drought in Benares, and the king of the region gave his daughter in marriage to Akrura's father, who was visiting Benares at the time. As a result of this gift, the drought ended. The elders, thinking Akrura had the same power as his father, declared that Akrura should be brought back. Lord Krishna knew that Akrura's exile was not the main cause of the disturbances. Still, he had Akrura brought back to Dwarka, and after properly honoring him with worship and greeting him with sweet words, Krishna told him, I know Shatadhanva left the jewel in your care. Since Satrajit had no sons, his daughter's offspring are the just claimants to whatever property he has left behind. Nonetheless, it would be best for you to keep the troublesome jewel in your care. Just let me show it once to my relatives. Akrura presented Krishna with the jewel, which shone as brilliantly as the sun, and after the Lord had shown it to his family members, he returned it to Akrura. That's a summary of the chapter. Now we'll go to the verses. Text 1. Sri Badarayani said, although Lord Govinda was fully aware of what had actually occurred, when he heard reports that the Pandavas and Queen Kunti had burned to death, he went with Lord Balaram to the kingdom of the Kurus to fulfill the family obligations expected of him. Purport. The Lord was quite aware that the Pandavas had escaped the assassination plot of Duryodhana, although the world heard the false news that the Pandavas and their mother had perished in the fire. Text 2. The two lords met with Bhishma, Kripa, Vidura, Gandhari, and Drona. Showing sorrow equal to theirs, they cried out, "Alas, how painful this is." Purport. Srila Sridhar Swami points out that those who were involved in the assassination attempt were of course not at all sorry to hear of the Pandava's death. The persons specifically mentioned here, however, Bhishma, Kripa, Vidura, Gandhari, and Drona, were actually unhappy to hear of the supposed tragedy. Text 3. Taking advantage of this opportunity, O king, Akrura and Kritavarma went to Shatadanwa and said, "Why not take the Samantaka jewel?" Purport. Akrura and Kritavarma reasoned that since Krishna and Balaram were absent from Dwarka, Satrajit could be killed and the jewel stolen. Srila Sridhar Swami mentions that these two must have flattered Chatadanwa, telling him, "You are much braver than we are, so you kill him." Text 4. Satrajit promised his jewel-like daughter to us, but then gave her to Krishna instead, contemptuously neglecting us. So why should Satrajit not follow his brother's path? Purport. Since Satrajit's brother Prasena had been violently killed, the implication of following his brother's path is obvious. What we have here is an assassination plot. It is well known that both Akrura and Kritavarma are exalted, pure devotees of the Supreme Lord, so their unusual behavior requires some explanation. The Acharyas provided as follows. Srila Jiva Goswami states that Akrura, although a first-class, pure devotee of the Lord, was a victim of the anger directed against him by the residents of Gokula, because he took Lord Krishna away from Vrindavan, especially the gopis. They were real upset with him. The Goswami further states that Kritavarma had associated with Kamsa, both of them being members of the Bhoja dynasty, and thus Kritavarma was now suffering from this undesirable association. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti offers an alternative explanation. Both Akrura and Kritavarma were furious with Satrajit because he had insulted Lord Krishna and spread false rumors about him in Dwarka. Under normal circumstances, Akrura and Kritavarma would have been most pleased that Lord Krishna married the beautiful Satyabhama. Being pure devotees, they could not actually be unhappy about this match, nor could they have become jealous rivals of the Lord. Therefore, they had an ulterior motive in behaving like his rivals. Text 5. His mind, thus influenced by their advice, wicked Shatadanwa murdered Satrajit in his sleep, simply out of greed. In this way, the sinful Shatadanwa shortened his own lifespan. Purport. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti, the word asatama indicates that Shatadanwa was basically evil-minded and a firm hater of Satrajit. Text 6. As the women of Satrajit's palace screamed and helplessly wept, Shatadhanva took the jewel and left, like a butcher after he had killed some animals. Text 7. When Satyabhama saw her dead father, she was plunged into grief, lamenting, my father, oh, I am killed." She fell unconscious. Purport. According to Srila Jiva Goswami, Satyabhama's anguished feelings and words at the death of her father were prompted by Lord Krishna's pastime potency, Leela Shakti, to prepare for the Lord's violent reaction against Shatadhanva. Text 8. Queen Satyabhama put her father's corpse in a large vat of oil and went to Hastinapur, where she sorrowfully told Lord Krishna, who was already aware of the situation, about her father's murder. Text 9. When Lord Krishna and Lord Balaram heard this news, O king, they exclaimed, "Alas, this is the greatest tragedy for us." Thus, imitating the ways of human society, they lamented, their eyes brimming with tears. Text 10. The Supreme Lord returned to his capital with his wife and elder brother. After arriving in Dwarka, he readied himself to kill Shatadhanva and retrieve the jewel from him. Text 11. Upon learning that Lord Krishna was preparing to kill him, Shatadhanva was struck with fear. To save his life, he approached Kritavarma and begged him for help. But Kritavarma replied as follows. 12 and 13. Kritavarma said, "I dare not offend the Supreme Lords, Krishna and Balaram. Indeed, how can one who troubles them expect any good fortune?" Kamsa and all his followers lost both their wealth and their lives because of enmity toward him, and after battling them 17 times, Jarasandha was left without even a chariot. Purport. Srila Sridhar Swami explains that the word helanam indicates acting against the Lord's will, and that virginam indicates an offense against the Lord's. Text 14. His appeal refused, Shatadhanva went to Akrura and begged him for protection. But Akrura similarly told him, who would oppose the two personalities of Godhead if he knew their strength? Text 15. It is the Supreme Lord who creates, maintains, and destroys this universe simply as his pastime. The cosmic creators cannot even understand his purpose, bewildered as they are by his illusory maya. Purport. The use of the singular ya, he who, indicates that the frequent references to the two lords, Krishna and Rama, do not compromise the firm principle of monotheism expressed in the Srimad-Bhagavatam. As explained in many Vedic literatures, the one Supreme Lord expands himself into innumerable forms, yet he remains the one and Almighty God. For example, we have this statement in the Brahma Samhita 533, Advaitam Achyutam Anadir Anantarupam. The one Supreme Lord is infallible and beginningless, and he expands himself into innumerable manifest forms. Out of regard for the spirit of the Lord's pastimes, in which he expands himself and appears as his own older brother Balaram, the Bhagavatam here refers to the two lords. But the bottom line is that there is one Supreme Godhead, one absolute truth, who appears in his original form as Krishna. Text 16. As a child of 7, Krishna uprooted an entire mountain and held it aloft as easily as a young boy picks up a mushroom. Text 17. I offer my obeisances to that Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, whose every deed is amazing. He is the Supreme Soul, the unlimited source and fixed center of all existence. 18. His appeal thus rejected by Akrura also, Shatadanwa placed the precious jewel in Akrura's care and fled on a horse that could travel 100 yojanas, 800 miles. Purport. The term yasya, leaving in the care of, implies Shatadanwa now believed that the jewel was his. Thus he was leaving it in the care of a friend. In blunt terms, this is a thief's mentality. Text 19. My dear king, Krishna and Balaram mounted Krishna's chariot, which flew the flag of Garuda and was yoked with tremendously swift horses, and pursued their elder's murderer. Text 20. In a garden on the outskirts of Mithila, the horse Shatadanwa was riding collapsed. Terrified, he abandoned the horse and began to flee on foot, with Krishna in angry pursuit. Text 21. As Shatadanwa fled on foot, the Supreme Lord, also going on foot, cut off his head with his sharp-edged disc. The Lord then searched Shatadanwa's upper and lower garments for the Samantaka jewel. Text 22. Not finding the jewel, Lord Krishna went to his elder brother and said, "We have killed Shatadanwa uselessly. The jewel isn't here." But he knew that he had killed his father-in-law. To this, Lord Balaram replied, "Indeed, Shatadanwa must have placed the jewel in the care of someone. You should return to our city and find that person." 24. I wish to visit King Videha, who is most dear to me. O king, having said this, Lord Balaram, the beloved descendant of Yadu, entered the city of Mithila. Purport. Krishna and Balaram had finally caught up with Shatadanwa on the outskirts of Mithila. Since the king of this city was a dear friend of Balaram's, the Lord decided to enter the city and spend some time there. 25. The king of Mithila immediately rose from his seat when he saw Lord Balaram approaching. With great love, the king honored the supremely worshipable Lord by offering him elaborate worship as stipulated by scriptural injunctions. Text 26. The Almighty Lord Balaram stayed in Mithila for several years, honored by his affectionate devotee, Janak Maharaj. During that time, Dhritarashtra's son Duryodhana learned from Balaram the art of fighting with a club. Text 27. Lord Keshava arrived in Dwarka and described the demise of Shatadanwa and his own failure to find the Syamantaka jewel. He spoke in a way that would please his beloved Satyabhama. Purport. Naturally, Queen Satyabhama was pleased to hear that her father's murderer had been brought to justice, but her father's Syamantaka jewel still had to be recovered, and thus she was also pleased to hear of Lord Krishna's determination to recover it. 28. Lord Krishna then had the various funeral rites performed for his deceased relative, Satrajit. The Lord attended the funeral along with well-wishers of the family. Text 29. When Akrura and Kritavarma, who had originally incited Shatadanwa to commit his crime, heard that he had been killed, they fled Dwarka in terror and took up residence elsewhere. Text 30. In Akrura's absence, ill omens arose in Dwarka, and the citizens began to suffer continually from physical and mental distresses, as well as from disturbances caused by higher powers and by creatures of the earth. Purport. The word Daivika here refers to disturbances caused by supernatural beings. These disturbances often manifest as natural calamities like earthquakes, tidal waves, or extreme weather. Nowadays, materialistic people attribute these disturbances to earthly causes, not realizing that they constitute punishment at the hands of superior beings. The word bhautika refers to trouble caused by creatures, fellow creatures of the earth, such as human beings, animals, and insects. According to Srila Sridhar Swami, Akrura took the Samantaka jewel and went to reside in the city of Benares, where he became known as Dhanapati, the master of charity. There he executed fire sacrifices on gold altars with elaborate assemblies of qualified priests. Some residents of Dwarka felt that the unusual calamities were due to Akrura's absence, forgetting, as described in the next verse, that the Supreme Lord's personal presence in Dwarka precluded that possibility. Because when the Lord comes to earth, his pastimes resemble those of human beings, the principle of familiarity breeds contempt comes into play. It appears that during the lives of many saintly persons and incarnations of God, there always exists a class of people who fail to appreciate, or who only occasionally appreciate, the position of the great souls among them. On the other hand, the fortunate and enlightened souls who recognize the true position of the Lord and his associates are supremely blessed. 31. Some men proposed that the troubles were due to Akrura's absence, but they had forgotten the glories of the Supreme Lord, which they themselves had so often described. Indeed, how can calamities occur in a place where the personality of Godhead, the residence of all the sages, resides? Purport. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti provides the following insight on this verse. In Benares, Akrura became famous for performing sacrifices on golden altars and for his abundant charity to the Brahmanas. When the citizens of Dwarka heard about this, some of them gossiped that Krishna, considering Akrura a rival, had sent him into exile. To dispel this new and incredible stain on his reputation, Lord Krishna created various calamities in Dwarka, thus inducing the citizens to call for Akrura's return, which the Lord then ordered. 32. The elders said, previously when Lord Indra had withheld rain from Kashi, Benares, the king of that city gave his daughter Gandhini to Shilpalka, who was then visiting him. It soon rained in the kingdom of Kashi. Purport. Shilpalka was Akrura's father, and the citizens felt that the son must have the same power as the father. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti points out that because of Akrura's relationship with his maternal grandfather, the king of Kashi, in a time of difficulty, Akrura went to that city. Text 33. Wherever his equally powerful son, Akrura, stays, Lord Indra will provide sufficient rain. Indeed, that place will be free of miseries and untimely deaths. Text 34. Hearing these words from the elders, Lord Janardhan, though aware that the absence of Akrura was not the only cause of the evil omens, had him summoned back to Dwarka and spoke to him. Purport. Since Lord Krishna is the supreme controller, it was obviously his will, by his will, that certain troubles appeared in the city of Dwarka. Superficially, these evils may have been caused by Akrura's absence, and also by the absence of the auspicious Samantaka jewel. But we should recall that Dwarka is the eternal abode of Lord Krishna. It is a city of divine bliss because the Lord resides there. Still, to execute his pastimes as a prince of this world, Lord Krishna did the needful and summoned Akrura. Lord Krishna honored Akrura, greeted him confidentially, and spoke pleasant words with him. Then the Lord, who was fully aware of Akrura's heart, by virtue of his being the knower of everything, smiled and addressed him, O Master of Charity, surely the opulent Samantaka jewel was left in your care by Shatadhanva and is still with you. Indeed, we have known this all along. Purport. Lord Krishna's treatment of Akrura here confirms that he is actually a great devotee of the Lord. 37. Since Satrajit had no sons, his daughter's sons should receive his inheritance. They should pay for memorial offerings with water and pinda, clear their grandfather's outstanding debts, and keep the remainder of the inheritance for themselves. Purport. Srila Sridhar Swami quotes the following Smriti injunction regarding inheritance. Patni duritas chaiva pitaro brartaras tata tatsuta gotraja bandhu shishya sa brahmacharina. The inheritance goes first to the wife, then, if the wife has passed away, to the daughters, then to the parents, then to the brothers, then to the brothers' sons, then to the family members of the same gotra as the deceased, and then to his disciples, including brahmacharis. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti adds that since Satrajit had no sons, since his wives were killed together with him, and since his daughter Satyabhama was not interested in the Samantaka jewel, which constituted the inheritance, it rightly belonged to her sons. In Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Srila Prabhupada explains, Lord Krishna indicated by this statement that Satyabhama was already pregnant and that her son would be the real claimant of the jewel and would certainly take it from Akrura if he tried to conceal it. 38 and 39. This is a very complicated plot here. Nevertheless, the jewel should remain in your care, O trustworthy Akrura, because no one else can keep it safely. But please, show the jewel just once, since my elder brother does not fully believe what I have told him about it. In this way, O most fortunate one, you will pacify my relatives. Everyone knows you have the jewel, for you are now continually performing sacrifices on altars of gold. Purport. Although technically Satyabhama's sons had a right to the jewel, Lord Krishna decided to leave the jewel in the care of Akrura, who was using the jewel's wealth to continually perform religious sacrifices. Indeed, Akrura's ability to perform such rituals on altars of gold was an indication of the jewel's potency. Text 4. Thus shamed by Lord Krishna's conciliatory words, the son of Shapaka brought out the jewel from where he had concealed it in his clothing and gave it to the Lord. The brilliant gem shone like the sun. Purport. We can see in this chapter how a valuable jewel caused so much intrigue, violence, and suffering. This is certainly a good lesson for those who desire a trouble-free spiritual life. Text 41. This is why you travel around so much, so you don't accumulate things. Yeah? She knows. Translation. After the mighty Lord had shown the Syamataka jewel to his relatives, thus dispelling the false accusations against him, he returned it to Akrura. Purport. For the second time, doubts about the Lord's reputation occasioned by the Syamataka jewel are dispelled by the jewel itself. Indeed, for the second time, the Lord brought the jewel to Dwarka to establish his integrity there. This amazing series this amazing series of incidents demonstrates that even when Lord Krishna descends to this world, there is a tendency for his peers to criticize him. Thus, the whole material world is infected by the fault-finding propensity. And in this chapter, the Supreme Lord demonstrates the nature of this undesirable quality. And it's just rampant nowadays on the earth. It's rampant everywhere you go. People are finding fault with one another. Factionalism, dissension, and all these things. Political craziness. Text 42. This narration, rich with the descriptions of the prowess of Lord Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, removes sinful reactions and bestows auspiciousness. Anyone who recites, hears, or remembers, it will drive away his own infamy and sins and attain peace. Thus end the purports of the humble servants of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, to the 10th canto, 57th chapter of Srimad-Bhagavatam, entitled Satrajit, Murdered, the Jewel Returned. Jai Krishna Balaram Ki Jai. So, another act of the divine play of Lord Krishna's pastimes has passed. We've heard it, and no one can take it away from us. The effects have entered into the heart and are permanently there, residing, as the last verse says, driving away all our infamy and sins and allowing us to attain peace eventually. So we're going to stop here because we got started late, and I'm in the process of an adventure of, doing things with my computer madness. And also we have friends here we haven't seen in a while, I'd like to spend some time with. So we're going to break out the, what do we call it? Yes, the mic, the open mic section of our program. And we have a little microphone, and anything that brought your mind, or it was a very complicated plot and a lot of names that maybe were unfamiliar with you. It's like reading a novel, it's like reading a Russian novel or something. You get halfway through the book and you're just beginning to figure out who's who and what's what. But anyway, the ball is in your court. Hare Krishna. Yes, Radharaman, I was hoping you'd start things off.
Maharaj, I was just thinking, what a lot of bother over a jewel of 2 chapters.
Yeah.
And the enmity it caused, the discord it caused, the misunderstanding it caused, the accusations it caused, even against Krishna himself.
Yeah.
So I think it's alluded to in one of the purports towards the end. isn't it? I can't quite remember. They say that just shows that devotees have to be careful of such things, something like
Yeah,
that.
that's the ultimate moral of the story. And the other point that was raised many times during the purports was that because when Krishna manifests his form in the material world, he agrees to, in some ways, follow the laws of material nature. Of course, he does things also that are completely against the laws of material nature, transcendental to the laws of material nature. But still, in general, he follows the laws. Like, for instance, he appears to go from Vrindavan to Mathura, then Mathura to Dwarka. But in actuality, he lives in all those places eternally in the spiritual world. But in the material world, when those places all manifest and Krishna comes to actually demonstrate the potency of the Absolute Truth, he sometimes acts as a human being, even though he's obviously not. Human being can't marry 16,000 queens and maintain them in 16,000 palaces and have relationships with each one of them at the same time. That's not humanly possible. And he did so many things like that. So yes, to show us what to do and what not to do in order to live a peaceful life in this world. He enacts this drama. It's like a actor on a stage, And at the same time, because he is the Supreme Lord, his personal presence purifies everyone who comes in contact with him. So even these personalities who it seems to be some kind of, mundane horror story or something, a murder mystery type of thing. But everybody that comes in contact with him becomes benefited spiritually. A little difficult to understand, but if we read the whole Bhagavatam all the way through to this point, then we'll better understand. Yeah, you don't want to have a whole bunch of jewels. There are jewels that there are all kinds of, like big jewels that were, collected by Her Majesty's empire and then struck back later on. The Hope diamond and other jewels, there were curses around, and every time a person had the jewel, some disaster happened in their family. It's happened a lot, actually. And it also is true that certain jewels have potency. They have a kind of power, special powers, healing powers and other things. Yeah, so we don't need those things, actually.
So is that part of the moral of the story?
Yeah, that part of it?
Is that the moral of the story, that we don't need those things?
Yes, absolutely.
And that we all get into bother?
Yes. Yeah, it's the nature of human beings to want to enjoy, because the soul is by nature an enjoyer. Krishna is the supreme enjoyer, and each one of us, individual souls, are little enjoyers, And when we come to the material world, we forget that our real enjoyment is with Krishna, and therefore we think that we can enjoy this, or we can own this, or this, or this. And that gets us in trouble every time. And then we have to go into another body and act it out, the whole thing again, and again, and again. And after enough time of that, then we get tired of it. Even if we don't understand the details of why, we get tired of it. And then our eyes open at that point. But the point I'm making is that, and if you advance spiritually sufficiently, you will be able to perceive directly that the pains of the body and the mind, which I was speaking to you about before we started the reading, they don't touch the soul. They don't have to touch, the soul is by nature happy. The soul is by nature joyful. And a part of the symptom of a person who's spiritually advanced is they're joyful all the time, not just part of the time. They don't get elated when something good happens and depressed when something bad happens, because they're tasting, spiritual pleasure all the time. And the way to do that is to become fixed in hearing about Krishna. That's the actual process given in the Vedas and actually demonstrated by, the authorities, the holders of the truth and the givers of the truth to human society.
The word lust springs to mind, Maharaj. All this talk of
Wait,
jewels,
before
trouble.
you got to get your, there you go.
Yeah, the word lust springs to mind with all this talk of jewels and
Yes.
trouble and intrigue.
Well, and greed.
Yeah.
And greed. In Satrajit's case, it was greed.
No.
And in the Gita, there's one very nice verse. There are 3 gates. Let me see if I can find it. Do you remember the verse? I think it's in the 18th chapter.
3 gates to hell.
Yeah.
16th chapter.
16th? Oh yeah, 60th. 16th chapter.
Towards the end.
Towards the end. Yes. In this chapter is called the divine and demoniac natures, and this shows the stark contrast of those persons who have divine qualities and those who have demoniac qualities. And then after an elaborate description of the demoniac qualities, which results in hellish existence, Krishna says, there are 3 gates leading to this hell: lust, anger, and greed. Every sane man should give these up, for they lead to the degradation of the soul. Purport. The beginning of demoniac life is described herein. One tries to satisfy his lust, and when he cannot, anger and greed arise. That means after frustration. Anger after frustration. Whenever we desire something very intensely and we work hard or connive or do something illegal or whatever to get it, once we get it, then it doesn't satisfy us. And that results in frustration. Every time you do something in the material world to try to satisfy a desire that you have, which cannot be satisfied by anything material. The soul cannot be satisfied by anything material until the soul meets Krishna and begins its natural function of loving service to Krishna. The soul cannot be satisfied. What to speak of happy?
We do such a good job of trying to achieve that happiness and satisfaction, don't we?
Yeah, we become experts. After a few billion births, we become very expert at it. But also, we intuitively, instinctively, we begin to understand after enough time of trying enough things and having it not work, then we start to think, I remember the exact moment this happened to me in this life. I was in Mount Tamalpais in Marin County, north of San Francisco, where all the action was in those days. Late 60s and early 70s. And I was up there and I was with friends and we were partying and all that stuff. Music playing and this and that and the other thing. And I remember looking out and it was beautiful. Mount Tamalpais, one of the most beautiful, attractive places in the world actually. And I thought to myself, there must be something more to it than this. Because it wasn't really satisfying me. I was doing what everybody was doing, and seemed like the in thing to do in those days, but it didn't get its purport. The beginning of demoniac life is described herein. One tries to satisfy his lust, and when he cannot, anger and greed arise. A sane man who does not want to glide down to the species of demoniac life must try to give up these three enemies, which can kill the self to such an extent that there will be no possibility of liberation from this material entanglement. Well put.
I'm thinking a fair bit lately how, so when you think about all the trouble that's going on in the world, if you
Put it closer, I think. Yeah.
if you carry on tracing it all back, and it all sort of terminates at lust, doesn't it? Kind of thing. If you trace all the trouble that's going on in the world back, it kind of always ends up at a point of
Lust, anger, and greed.
for something.
Lust, anger, and greed.
Yeah.
It starts with lust, yes.
Yeah.
Krishna says, Kama Esha, Krodha Esha, Rajaguna Samudvava, Mahashino Mahapatmam Vidyana Minivarinam. The verse before this, Arjuna asks Krishna, what is it that causes me sometimes to act sinfully, even though I know better, as if something's forcing me to do something that I know is not good for me? And then Krishna answers, it's lust. And the lust is enacted by the association with the mode of passion. And in another place, Krishna describes that when one contemplates the objects of the senses, it's the opposite of contemplation on God consciousness or on spiritual principles and spiritual philosophy. If you contemplate the objects of the senses, then you become attached to those things, So it's the counter opposite. If you meditate and contemplate on spiritual principles and spiritual activities and spiritual desires, that will take you in spiritual direction. If you contemplate the object of the senses for your own sense gratification, that takes you, on a path. And the path is described also in the second chapter of the Gita. There he says, Jayato Vishayan Pungsa Sangas Te Shubhajayate. When you meditate on the object of the senses, then one becomes attached. You identify strongly with those things. And then when one tries to satisfy one's senses with that physical object, because the soul is what wants to be satisfied. But again, the senses don't, the sensual gratification of the different parts of the senses of the body don't touch the soul. It cannot satisfy the soul by nature, by definition. And then when one tries, then frustration comes. And then from frustration, anger. Krodha bhavati samoha. From that anger, because the anger means ignorance. And the symptoms of the ignorance are krodha bhavati samoha. Samoha means bewilderment. The soul becomes confused. And then when bewilderment comes, then memory, smriti, the memory becomes lost. And when your memory is lost, then you'll do anything. You're intelligent, you lose your intelligence, and then you can say or do anything. There's a Bengali saying, what a crazy man won't talk, and what a goat won't eat. Just as a goat will eat anything, a madman will say anything and do anything. And then we fall down into the material pool again. When you put a rock into a pool, what sound does it make? Bloop, 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 bloop. So when the devotees read this, and then one of the first devotees left, one of the devotees said, "Oh, he blooped." And Prabhupada said, "Blooped?" And he said, "Yes, Prabhupada, it says right here in your book. He falls into the material pool. Bloop." That's where the word coined. The phrase was coined at that point in time. So it's all there. It's all just so clearly described in this book. If we can just learn to get a taste for trying to understand our spiritual identity and the material world, what the laws of nature are, what the purpose of it is, and where our ultimate destination is, then we have a chance. We have a chance to taste real happiness. Happiness that won't come and go. Happiness that won't cause more restlessness rather than less restlessness. Cheers. Yes, Vicky.
I've got quite a broad question. The Srimad-Bhagavatam, how does that fit with the Mahabharata and the Gita? How does it kind of all fit together?
What a lovely question. You should come around more often. She's got good spiritual intelligence. Did you notice? I think you probably have. Yes. Originally, there was one Veda. Sometimes it's described by some sages as the Atharva, sometimes as the Yajur. But in any case, there was one sound made up of many, many mantras. And in those mantras, there were the descriptions of sacrificial performances, ritualistic performances, and all the details of how to do them, and how to propitiate the higher personalities and the demigods. Prabhupada called them demigods, but they're more powerful personalities who take care of the resources of the nature and all these things. And then there's an appendix to those Vedas. Vyasadeva came, and this was about 5,000 years ago, and he took that one Veda, which has all the different knowledge in it, but it's not organized. And unless one was, you think you get confused about one chapter of one pastime of Krishna. Well, these Vedas are very difficult to understand. Actually, the language is not understandable by human beings. It's the language, the Sanskrit language of the verses, hymns, are understandable by the higher personalities who were propitiated by the sacrifices. So that's one category of knowledge. And it's meant to teach us how to regulate our lives and perform sacrifice to improve our lot in life. And then there's an appendix that was put onto them called the Upanishads. And the Upanishads explain what the difference between matter and spirit is, because the vast majority of those original Vedas, the verses of the Vedas, have to do with what we call the Karmakanda section, which means how to perform fruitive activities in sacrifice to improve our lot in the material world. There's no knowledge or desire of how to leave the material world, just how to get a better position in the material world, right? So then, after what Vedavyas did was he organized all those it's like if a king had a whole big bag of jewels, diamonds and emeralds and rubies and sapphires and really jewels, precious gems. And he would take somebody that was, Vishwanath Chakrabarti Thakur gives this example, that it's like a king hiring a very, very qualified and trusted person to separate out all those jewels and organize them into piles where each. So that's what Vedavyas did. Took all the jewel-like hymns and he organized them into 4, Rig, Sama, Yajur, and Atharva Vedas. And the Upanishads were there also. And then he also organized the Puranas. He edited the Puranas. The Puranas are an explanation of the Vedic hymns put into context of history, historical events, different kings and their lives and sages and their lives and the teachings and how it all fit together in history. They're called the Itihasas. Puranas, and then the Itihasas are the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, Lord Ramachandra's pastimes, and the pastimes of Greater Bharat. Mahabharata means Greater India. And then he wanted to summarize the whole thing, Vedavyas. So he compiled the Vedanta Sutra, which actually is a summary of the Vedas and the Upanishads. And he still wasn't satisfied. And that's impossible for any human being to do. But he did it, because he's a literary incarnation of Krishna. So, but he wasn't satisfied, and just then Narada Muni, a spiritual master, shows up and looks at him and says, "What's wrong with you?" And he said, "I've done all this work and I'm still not satisfied." And Narada Muni said, "Well, that's obvious." And he had already thought that maybe it was because I didn't exclusively worship or glorify the absolute truth, Krishna. Krishna's there in all those literatures, but it's not concentrated. It's mixed with all these different politics and economics and sociology and all those things, how to live a life in the material world, perform sacrifices. So then he said, you should write a literature or compile a literature. And then he understood and he went into trance. And in that trance, he saw Krishna, he saw the material energy, he saw everything. And then he brought that literature back into the manifested world, and that's the Srimad-Bhagavatam. The Srimad-Bhagavatam is an explanation of all those works before. So it's got elements of all the histories and Puranas and philosophy and everything, but it's all in relationship with Krishna.
So, the story of the Mahabharata kind of has part of the story of in terms of like the actual events that happen within it.
Wait, start again.
So, thank you for that explanation, because that was really helpful to kind of understand it as a whole.
It's important.
Yeah. So would that mean that part of the story of the Mahabharata is in the Mahabharata and in the
Yes.
Srimad-Bhagavatam?
Yes,
But
there are some overlapping
Yeah.
things. There is some overlapping, but the main theme of the Mahabharata was, the change of sovereignty of the earth to Yudhishthira.
Mm-hmm.
Because the sovereignty of the earth at the time was in the hands of Dhritarashtra, who was the brother of the Pandava's father.
Yeah.
And he died untimely in the forest, Pandu, and his sons were not of age, they were children.
Mm-hmm.
And when they came out of the forest with Kunti, their mother, they weren't eligible to be king, because Pandu was the king. And Dhritarashtra was blind by birth. Therefore, he was not eligible to be the king. Because a person, to be the king, you have to be all whole. You can't have something like that missing to actually be the king. But because of emergency, Dhritarashtra took the throne and nobody complained, even the brahmanas, because it was necessary by emergency. And then Dhritarashtra had sons, of whom Duryodhana was the eldest. And Duryodhana was a demoniac person, a serious demoniac person. And he was envious of the Pandavas. So when it came time for the Pandavas to be old enough to take over the kingdom, then there was intrigue. Dhritarashtra and Duryodhana, particularly Duryodhana, but Dhritarashtra was weak-hearted. He was too attached to his sons. Therefore, even though he knew that Krishna was God, and he knew that he was doing the wrong thing, he couldn't help himself because he was too attached to his demoniac son. And then there was so many intrigues. So that's the story of the Mahabharata. The events leading up to the Battle of Kurukshetra and immediately after the Battle of Kurukshetra. But the Bhagavatam sets the stage during that period of time, and then describes the sacrifice of the sages of Naimisharanya, and describes what happened after that battle. And Arjuna's son, Abhimanyu, was killed in the battle, but his wife was pregnant, and her son was Parikshit Maharaj, who inherited the throne. And it was Parikshit Maharaj who was cursed by a Brahmin boy. And then he knew that he was going to die in 7 days. So he went to the bank of the Yamuna, the Ganges, and he decided that he was going to renounce everything and concentrate on his spiritual life, but he didn't know exactly what to do. So a whole bunch of sages from all over the universe came there, because Parikshit Maharaj was a very, very elevated person. And just at that moment, when they couldn't quite agree on what he should do, Shukadev Goswami came. Shukadev Goswami was the son of Vyasadeva, who was the one who did all this literary work I was talking about. And Vyasadeva chose Shukadev to be the giver of this knowledge. And that's when the Bhagavatam was spoken for the first time.
Right.
So that's how it all kind of fits together. And then the Bhagavatam is spoken by Shukadev in a question and answer format, which is basically what the Vedas are, of questions and answers. And it summarizes all the Vedas, all the Puranas, all the Itihasas in a very condensed form that revolve around the appearances and disappearances of Krishna's incarnations and the pure devotees of Krishna and their incarnations up into the pastimes of Krishna. So the Bhagavatam gives the details of the pastimes of Krishna. Krishna is there in the Mahabharata,
Yeah.
but he's not the main character.
Yeah.
So Krishna is meant to be the main character. And once you get that and hear the Bhagavatam, then you don't have to take all the trouble to read all those books, because for us in this age, we're not intelligent enough, frankly, and we don't have a long enough lifespan to read all the Vedas and get the point, you know. So the Bhagavatam gives it to us, And when Lord Chaitanya came, he taught the Bhagavatam. He spoke the Bhagavatam again and gave the holy name and chanted the holy name. And that's the Yuga Dharma. That's why it's described here in these prayers that we always read before we read the Bhagavatam. Sanatana Goswami's prayers. There it describes that, every syllable of this book, is there's a flood of prema, love for God, pure love for God. And it's non-different than Krishna. Just as the holy name of Krishna is non-different than Krishna, so the Srimad-Bhagavatam is non-different than Krishna. 335 chapters in the Srimad-Bhagavatam. 90 of those chapters are about Krishna.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Hare Krishna. Yes, Vedarama.
There's two very nice questions.
Oh. We're getting from the cyberspace.
From Yasmin.
Oh, Jasmine, we're waiting for you to come. You're going to come a PhD, so you're going to come and we can enlighten the PhD and feel good about ourselves.
I'm not going to ask them in order. I'll do it in the opposite order because the second question is actually follows on from what you were previously saying. What does it mean that Vyasadeva is the literary incarnation of Krishna? Why was it not obvious to him earlier to write the Srimad-Bhagavatam if he is an incarnation of Krishna?
Well, the universe is structured. The history of the universe is structured. It goes in cycles. And Vyasadeva is a post. So at the end of the Kali Yuga, Vyasadeva always comes and reorganizes the Vedas. But this particular incarnation of Vyasadeva was special. And it was because the Bhagavatam was introduced. So the Vedas are there, and the Vedas contain all these different subject matters and levels of realization because there are so many varieties of personalities in the world. Not everyone can take to the Bhagavatam. But in the Kali Yuga, because we become so fallen, it's organized in such a way that we get the Bhagavatam in the Kali Yuga so that we can get the essence of all the Vedas without having to go through all the Vedas, or without having to go through the yoga system, for instance, which is also described in essence in a sutric form in the Gita, in the Bhagavad Gita. So he's a literary incarnation of God because he brings the Bhagavatam into the world, and no one else but Krishna could do that. Compile and edit all the Vedas and the Puranas and everything. In the Gita, Krishna himself says, Vidaishcha sarvar aham eva vedyo, Vedanta krit eva vid eva chaham. So there he admits that he is the compiler of the Vedanta Sutra. That's Vyasadeva. So there's the connection that reveals that Vyasadeva is a literary incarnation of Krishna. Krishna says in the Gita, Vedanta Krit. Vedavid, I'm the knower of the Vedas. So he never says that he's the compiler of the Vedas. He's the compiler of the Vedanta Sutra, Vyasadeva, but not of the Bhagavatam or the Vedas themselves. They are eternal. They're co-eternal with God. So only God can bring the co-eternal sound of the Vedas into human society. So even though he knew, just like here we just heard the story of, the Samantaka jewel and Krishna, He knows everything, but he allows, the Samantaka jewel to come into the picture, and then he allows that there be some, rumor or something, and then he arranges for the, the revelation that it's just a rumor, and he always sorts everything out. Whereas now in this age, there's rumors abound. Now they're going to have a political, collection, and everybody's, talking about everybody else. And there's rumors abounding, and there's no one that can actually just sort the whole thing out, and no one's ever satisfied with anybody's answers. But Krishna does that. He does that both in his life, in the different incidents in his life. He's never defeated. There's never any controversy that isn't settled by him in a way that makes it clear. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean that everybody accepts it, but it makes it clear. He makes it clear. So for all those reasons, we understand that Vyasadeva is Krishna, and he's the literary incarnation of God, because no one else could do that, and Shakti Vesh, when a person does something that no one else but God could do, even if he's a jiva soul, then he becomes incarnation, or he is an incarnation. So Vyasadeva is the literary incarnation of Krishna, because he does something that only Krishna could do. When a soul does something that only God could do, then he's empowered by God to do it.
And the second question, but just before I ask it, just so you know that there's devotees on the book distribution marathon watching the live streams. Charlie from Wales offices a
Charlie, Haribo, I have a email that I owe him a response to. You can tell him that well, I guess I'm telling him now. I've got what he is too. Yes, I will answer your email, Charlie. Thanks for tuning in. What's his thing?
Charlie Davison. And the Jasmine's second question is, Hare Krishna Maharaj, are lust, anger and greed more potent or worse than envy?
Envy comes from the others. These are the roots. Lust, anger, and greed. But in another sense, pride. The source of all these inauspicious things, qualities, is ignorance. Ignorance is the cause of all inauspicious activities of the soul. So the first symptom of that is pride. So knowledge comes from humility and pridelessness. That's found, you can look it up. It's in the 13th chapter, verses 8 to 12. There's a list of 18 items which form the basis of knowledge, or not basis of knowledge, that are knowledge. The qualities that contradict or remove auspiciousness and cause one to be able to come out of the material entanglement, material conditioning. It's the solution to the problem. And it begins with humility and pridelessness. And all these other things, it's the same thing, but there's different ways of categorizing it, different ways of analyzing it. You know, as we were talking about before, you know, lust and anger and greed. Then there's kama, esha, krodha, esha, lust, anger. Same. It's a stepping stone. Envy is intimately related to it. Envy is intimately related to it. Because an envious person will do something to try to bring the other person down so that they can come up. But that's pride also. All of these things are very intimately related. It would take a long time actually to analyze that. We don't have so much time to be able to analyze the whole thing. But there's another way of analyzing it. There's 6, kama, krodha, lobha, matsya, moha. And these are another way of analyzing those auspicious qualities, and envy is one of them. Lust, anger, greed, envy, madness, illusion. These are the 6 whips that whip the soul and cause the soul to act against his own better interests. So they're all part of the same demoniac tendency. Just like they have elements, we call the elements, there's 8 elements: earth, water, fire, air, and ether, 5 basic elements. And then now they have divided those into so many. Now they have elements. Well, how many do they have now? 100 and some elements that the physicists have.
Periodic table.
Yes. It's the same thing. It's just divided into different ways. So lust, anger, and greed are the cornerstones, and envy and madness and illusion. They're there in the same category. They're just different divisions of the same thing. Ignorance. Because it all comes from ignorance of one's spiritual identity. We think we're material, therefore we become attached, and therefore we do things that cause us suffering and grief. Life after life after life. It's like committing suicide millions of times. You know? But the soul never dies. So it's illusory. I hope I'm not confusing everybody more than... No?
No.
Clearer?
Clear.
Phew, that's good.
She said thank you.
Thank you. And we look forward to seeing her soon. Nothing? Anything else from the... 7:55, my gosh. My, how time flies when you're having a good time. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. And we'll see you tomorrow night. Same time, same station here at Wisteria College, where there's some higher education going on. We've renamed the place from Wisteria Cottage to Wisteria College. And yeah. Srimad-Bhagavatam ki jai. Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. Sama Veda Bhakti Vrinda ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. See you tomorrow night. 6 o'clock, Hare Krishna.